Hey, what's up YouTube? Today we're going to be sharing with you some precision and technical driving tips. These are not only going to make you a better overall driver, but we're also going to be sharing with you some of the skills that professional drivers and stunt drivers know and use every single day. So I've been to a couple of different precision driving schools. I got to learn, from rally racers, and one of my instructors won the Baja 1000. And then I took those skills and I went overseas and drove in a lot of austere places and honed those skills in places where there's really no laws to driving. And that's where a lot of this stuff, came into practice for me. And we're going to share this stuff with you here today. So we accept no liability whatsoever for you using these techniques. Use them at your own risk. But this is certainly not some of the stuff that you learned in driver's ed class. So when most people are taught how to drive, they're taught, for safety and comfort reasons. But in precision or technical driving, we're really teaching you how to avoid accidents, how to drive in, more austere locations like outside of the US where there's not as many laws, how to tackle things like, technical terrain if you're doing overlanding or off-roading, and then also how do you use the performance of the vehicle to your advantage when you need to. So since learning these precision driving techniques, I've become a much better driver. I truly believe that if you learn these make you a better driver, even just in your daily and normal driving habits. Even if you're not going to be doing overlanding or off-roading or driving overseas in austere environments, these techniques will help you. They help you save your life. They keep you out of accidents, and they help you know what's going on just in day-to-day traffic wherever you may live. So make sure you stay tuned to the end of this video, because the last technique I'm going to share with you is going to show you how to have better power, braking, and control of any type of vehicle and in any type of environment. So stay tuned for that last tip. Okay, so Jenny here, have you ever done any precision driving before?
Not that I know of.
Okay, and I would say you're a pretty safe driver?
Very defensive and safe, yeah.
All right, so we're going to teach you. This is Jenny's first time. It really is Jenny's first time learning some of these skills, so we're going to walk through this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is driver position, and these are some things most people don't think of, but it does have a big impact. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to adjust your seat. So when you adjust your seat, Jenny, I want you to be able to, most people, they sit way too far back when they're driving. You want it to where when you put your hand or your wrist up on the steering wheel, your wrist is meeting the steering wheel. So right now you're too far back. So move a little bit more forward, and you want it so your wrist is going to be resting on top of the steering wheel. Stick your hand out all the way out. Yep, right like that. So that's the position you want, where your wrist is basically resting on top of the steering wheel. Now you want to lower the steering wheel down. Okay, so now Jenny has her proper distance. Now the next thing, Jenny, how did you learn in driver's ed to put your hands on the wheel?
10 and 2 o'clock.
10 and 2 o'clock. Okay, that's what most people learn, 10 and 2. But here's what I want you to do. For precision drive, that's good for comfort and, cruising down the parkway. But for precision driving, what I want you to do is go to 9 and 3. 9 and 3, okay. And do you feel like on the steering wheel here, there's like these actually two little lumps you can kind of feel? Mm-hmm. That's almost where you can do your hands. So here's why we do this in precision driving. Now look at your elbows. Do you see how you have more control in your elbows? Turn the wheel a little bit. Yep. So what this is doing, the 9 and 3 versus the 10 and 2, is actually giving, you're engaging your elbows and your body more in the turning of the wheel and the controlling of the vehicle. And in some vehicles, this actually gives you're actually feeling some of the inertia and the weight dynamics and distribution of the vehicle by just changing up this position. So 9 and 3 is what you want. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is vision. And in precision driving, this is kind of a given, but some people just have a lot of clutter and stuff that's blocking their field of vision. But you want to have clear field of vision as much as possible, 270, 360 degrees, and you want to have all your mirrors adjusted, because in precision driving, if you don't use your mirrors or you're used to using a backup camera, in precision driving, we're going to be using our mirrors a lot more and your peripheral vision, because you may be keeping your eyes on the road, but you're seeing objects and things out of your peripheral vision. So you really want to have a clear field of vision and all your mirrors properly adjusted to wherever you need them. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is foot position. We want to use what's called the heel-toe driving position. That means your heel is going to stay in contact with the floor of the vehicle at all times, and you're using the balls of your feet to engage the pedal. So what we don't want to be doing is like picking our feet up off the ground and moving it around, because this actually increases the reaction time. It causes more time to be braking and things like that. Now, in a manual transmission, there's actually a specific driving technique called heel-toe downshifting, where you're actually using the clutch and using your right foot to basically do gas and brake at the same time. I'm not going to get into that because we're using Jenny's automatic transmission Subaru today for this, so we won't get into that. But you want to maintain the heel-toe driving position whenever you're doing precision driving, or really just anytime you're driving at all. So next thing we're going to talk about is vehicle weight distribution. I honestly, truly believe this is probably one of the most vital things to understand, is how the vehicle weight distribution is working when you're driving a vehicle. So for instance, when you're braking, you're actually shifting all the weight of the vehicle to the front of the vehicle. And in a lot of vehicles, most vehicles in the world where the engine is up front, you're now putting a lot of weight on the front of the vehicle, which is causing less traction in your rear tires, and it also means that your rear brakes aren't going to be working or not as effective in the rear when you're braking and shifting all that weight to the front of your vehicle. Conversely, when you're going into a corner, if you're braking into the corner as you're going around a corner, that's going to cause, again, weight distribution to shift to the front of the vehicle. Now your back of the vehicle has less weight, it's becoming loose, and in cornering that can cause you to skid or to slide the back of the vehicle around. So you really want to be cognizant of what you're doing with the weight distribution. So, and conversely, when you're accelerating, especially when you're accelerating greatly, you're shifting the weight to the back of the vehicle, which is causing then less weight in the front of the vehicle. And especially with like front wheel drive vehicles, this is causing less traction, less ability. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever seen this, where if you're accelerating and there's not enough weight on the front of the vehicle, you can actually not be able to steer. I've seen that happen in ice and in inclement conditions, where your vehicle is not able to steer because there's just not enough traction with the road in the front during acceleration. So you need to be very cognizant of that. And then also, what we're talking about weight distribution is, as you're turning, you're shifting the weight of the vehicle. So depending on the direction you're turning, you're shifting weight from one side to the other, and that's going to cause less traction on the side that you're turning with. Now, we have some modern corrections to this. We have things like ABS and traction control, which help a little bit with some of these things, but you're not maybe always going to be in a vehicle where there's ABS or traction control. I know many times that I've gone overseas, or we've gotten a rental vehicle somewhere, they may not necessarily have traction control or ABS. So you're going to have to know how to do this, on your own. And I really, like I said, I believe that knowing how to do this without the use of all the fancy electronic stuff is a way better, you have much more control. You're much more confident as a driver knowing how this stuff works. So next thing we're going to talk about is cornering. And with cornering, you don't want to be either braking or accelerating too excessively through corners, especially when you're going at a higher rate of speed. And I see this a lot when people are going downhill and there's a curve. People will be braking into the curve, and what you're actually doing, what we just learned by the weight distribution, is you're actually causing less traction with the road, because you're shifting your weight into that turn, and you can easily have, like, especially on icy roads or wet roads, that can create a slide. So what you really want to be doing is, as you're approaching the corner, you're slightly braking before you hit the apex of the corner. Again, slightly, not slamming on the brakes, like just a little bit of pressure, and then you're slowing down the vehicle. And then as you're getting into the turn and going out of the turn, you want to have slight pressure on the gas, giving acceleration, because that's giving the vehicle more power, and then you're having more control, and you're balancing out the weight distribution as you go into and through the corner. Okay, so now that we learned a little bit about the vehicle dynamics and weight distribution, let's talk a little bit about why braking might be bad in an accident or an obstacle situation. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds crazy. Most of us were probably taught, if you see an obstacle in the road or an accident or something up ahead, we hit our brakes. And it's almost instinctive. But we're going to talk to you a little bit about why this may not be the best idea. So now, if you have enough stopping distance, absolutely you want to hit the brakes. But there's a lot of situations where you're, not going to have the amount of stopping distance necessary to get the brakes to stop. And I've seen this in situations, even with people that have ABS, when they hit their brakes and there's not enough time, they actually go into a slide and end up colliding with the vehicle in front of them. I've also seen where people slam on their brakes and then the people behind them that aren't paying attention actually hit them. So both of these situations is bad. We're going to talk about how do you avoid that. So again, another reason why braking may not be advisable in that situation we already talked about. You're actually, you're shifting the weight distribution to the front of the vehicle and causing less traction. And that's the last thing you want in an accident situation or when you're trying to have control and avoid an obstacle, is to have, all your weight shifted to one area or the other. So that's another reason why you don't want to brake. So the actual preferred technique that you use in this situation, I know it's going to sound crazy, but then rather than hitting the brakes, is you're actually going to use your gas. And you're going to use your gas to basically turn and get out of that situation. I know this is so counter to what you were taught in driver's ed of just slamming on your brakes, but what you're doing is you're trying to maintain, again, your traction and your weight distribution and finding a way out and keeping the most control on that vehicle as possible, rather than having improper weight distribution or causing the vehicle to slide. So we're going to show this technique here. I know it takes a little bit to get comfortable with, because we've been ingrained ever since we've been driving to hit the brakes when we see something. But again, if there's not that time, if there's not the reaction time to actually avoid a vehicle or avoid an obstacle, you're going to actually want to hit the gas and then steer out of the obstacle. So next thing we're going to talk about is, where do you look when you're driving? And this, again, kind of seems like common sense, but a lot of people don't do this. You actually want to look where you are going or where you want the vehicle to go, rather than looking at where you are at in the present moment. Now, it's human physiology that we actually fixate on things that we are looking at. So if we're looking, this is why things like rubbernecking happen, and when people are fixating and looking at something, we tend to drift or go towards that. That's just part of our basic biology. So there was actually a crash study done that showed that when people were fixating during accidents or looking at an object, they were much more likely to crash into that object than those that looked away or looked for a way to avoid the object. So one of the things we want to tell ourselves is, just when we're looking and we're in those situations, you want to look for an out or look for the safe way to go, versus looking and fixating at an object, because you will tend to just naturally drift in and you could hit that object. So another technique I learned as well is that you want to watch the actual drivers of the vehicles, not necessarily the vehicles. A lot of people just driving, they're watching the vehicles around them. But when you actually watch the driver of the vehicle, you can actually almost predict what that driver is going to do at times. Here's a good example. I don't know if you've seen this. I see this every single day when people are on their phone in the car, or they're texting, or they're just doing something that's distracted driving. You can almost predict when that person is going to do something erratic by watching the person, not necessarily the vehicle. And I see this every day. Like I said, watch the people driving the vehicle, not necessarily the vehicle, and then you can predict when people are going to be doing something. And speaking of erratic driving, let's next talk about oversteering. Well, no, you jerked. See what you did?
Yep.
So oversteering happens when the vehicle is doing something that we didn't expect. Maybe you hit a patch of ice, maybe you were, not paying attention and you slightly went off the road. And what happens is people tend to overcorrect, or you'll see people jerk to try to get back into, you know, onto the road or onto the lane or whatever they may be doing. And by oversteering, they actually cause an erratic movement in the vehicle, actually, because of weight distribution, because of whatever, it causes even a bigger concern. So an example of oversteering could be when, you know, maybe somebody's not paying attention, they veer into another lane. Maybe it's inclement weather, they hit a patch of ice, or, you know, I see this all the time again with people on their cell phones. They're not paying attention, and all of a sudden they veered into oncoming traffic or something, and then you'll see this kind of, you know, jerking motion to kind of correct it. And then what can happen again is in that jerking motion is we've seen people, they overcorrect too far, and then sometimes that can lead to greater issues. So the way we correct this is, rather than jerking the wheel, you want to calmly and smoothly put the vehicle back into the correct position. Okay, ready? Oh, calm, smooth. There you go.
Okay.
I get it. Again, if there's a vehicle coming at you in oncoming traffic, this is hard to do, but it's really the best to maintain control of the vehicle instead of jerking or making erratic movements. You really want to calmly and slowly bring the vehicle back onto the road surface, you know, maintain that vehicle weight distribution, not jerking, not doing anything erratic. So as promised, the last thing we're going to talk about today is what's called left foot braking, throttle modulation. Now, this is a technique that gives you a lot more control and power when you're driving your vehicle, and most people don't even think about this today. You know, in old manual transmission vehicles, we're using our left foot to operate, you know, the clutch or the brake. But in today's modern automatic vehicles, most of us, our left foot is just kind of hanging out, not doing anything, and we're using our right foot for everything. So when you're only using your right foot for both the gas and the brake, when you get into more precision driving or technical situations, or even like an accident situation, what happens is there is a reaction time there that it takes you to move your right foot from the gas and get it onto the pedal. Now, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when you're talking about, you know, when you add speed to that, that could be the difference in hundreds of feet in fractions of a second, and the vehicle is actually coasting while you're making that adjustment. So when you're doing, you know, left foot braking with throttle modulation, you're actually using your left foot to brake on the vehicle, and it's actually giving you more control, less reaction time, and you're able to have more precise control over what the vehicle is doing, and especially when it comes to things like off-roading and overlanding, transferring the weight balance of the vehicle. So by also using left foot braking while you're throttle modulating on the gas, this also allows you to be a little bit more finesse with the weight distribution, what the vehicle dynamics are doing, and especially when you're doing like technical terrain, like possibly going up hills or obstacles, it allows you to really fine-tune some of your driving techniques, so you're not, you know, shifting the weight of the vehicle, or, you know, possibly going over an obstacle at a high rate of speed. So left foot braking and throttle modulation also gives you, you know, when you're doing climbs or descents, with something like an overlanding vehicle or an off-roading vehicle, this gives you the ability to really control the weight distribution and the descent and the, you know, rate of incline. And for those of you using you know, vehicles that have rear disc brakes, this is actually extremely important, because you don't want the vehicle, a lot of times if you allow that rollback on a hill or something like that, or on a descent, it can cause your rear drum brakes to actually go into a slide, and you don't want to be just sliding out of control, either uphill or descending down a vehicle. So the technique's really simple. It just takes a little bit of time to get used to, but once you get used to it, it actually gives you greater control and allows you to go over obstacles and descents, and fine-tuning of your driving skills a heck of a lot better.